Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday. It is noon here in New London, New Hampshire, New England, New World. And right next to me over there is the amazing Ingrid Nixon. Good morning, Ingrid.
Hi, Simon. It's 8 o'clock here in Alaska.
I know. Well, that's why I said good morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. See, I knew because it's noon right now. I got my tea. What kind of coffee do you have? Is it just like regular Joe Schmoes, or is it special?
It's actually locally roasted, and yeah, so and it's got a fair weather name after the Fairweather Mountains. So
now, are those these?
Those are these. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
That is the Fairweather Range of Mountains. It's the tallest coastal range on the planet, and the tallest mountain is over 15,000 feet tall.
So that's bigger than some of the ones that we've got here in New Hampshire.
Maybe just a smidge.
Yeah, just a smidge. So, so that's the coast. That's not a lake then.
What you're looking there is a little area. It's called Bartlett Cove, and then it opens up into Glacier Bay here in Southeast Alaska. And then you've got the Fairweather Range. And then if you were to fly over the Fairweathers, you would find yourself in the Gulf of Alaska.
Wow. That's so cool. And that's the moon, right?
The moon is almost full. It's full tomorrow night. And yes, the moon is setting over the Fairweathers in that shot. That was this morning at about 6 o'clock. I was out walking. We're starting to get daylight, and it was just like, oh my word, this is so gorgeous.
So I got to ask you a question. Did you grow up in Alaska? I mean, were you born and raised in Alaska?
No, I was actually born in Minnesota. My family moved to the West Coast when I was in grade school, so I'm kind of a West Coaster. And then Alaska is kind of a range extension. I started coming up here leading trips when I was in my 20s. So, but we have been in Alaska it's about 30 years now. There was a little hiatus down in the lower 48, but yeah.
Was that fleeing a pandemic or something?
No, I had to sort of scratch that itch of making that commitment. Do I want to be in Alaska all the time, or do I want to be a little bit closer to family and explore some other options? And it was great. We had about 5 years down there, but we returned to Alaska a couple of years ago, and this just feels like home.
Yeah. And your brother moved up. Your brother lives in Alaska as well?
Yes. When I first came up to the state, I was leading tours and leading groups all throughout the state, and it was wonderful. I mean, it got me to the Arctic, it got me to Southeast, it got me everywhere, even into the Yukon Territory, Canada. And I have a brother who I just said, I'm like, you know what? If you ever go to Alaska, you will never come back. And that's true. He actually ended up being a policeman on the Pribilof Islands, which is this tiny, remote little group of islands in the Bering Sea. And then he moved to the big city, which was in Dutch Harbor, which is out on the Aleutian chain. And I know that keeps kind of popping out, but it comes back after a second or two. I hope that's not too scary.
No.
But anyway, and now he is a pilot. He flies all over the state, small planes, a lot of small villages. It's really cool. Yeah. So
when you say a big city where he was a cop, what was the population of that big city?
Not very big. I mean, Dutch Harbor is a fishing village with a lot of notoriety. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
So New London, New Hampshire has a population of about 4,000 people. So is it bigger than that?
You know, Dutch might have been about that size, to be honest. Okay. It kind of is a place where fishing fleets that are there in the Gulf of Alaska and in the Bering Sea will come into Dutch Harbor.
And then the population doubles?
It can. It can. Where I live right now in Alaska, we have a population of about 400 and change.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah.
and I know, so I got to say this for those of you that don't realize this, and I think most people who have at least commented do know this. Ingrid and I are part of the TBD storytelling cohort, and so I know a little bit more about Ingrid than I know about some of my guests. And you talk about your post being flown in, which is like I just love that idea.
Yeah. Well,
And
where I live,
supplies, right?
right. Yeah. Well, things either have to come in by plane or they have to come in by boat. And we do have a ferry, which comes sporadically, an Alaska State Ferry. Um, but yeah, and we're not on the road system. We have about 10 miles of road, and the community is about, roughly 10 miles away. And then where I live in Glacier Bay National Park, and there are 7 people total who live in the housing area here in Glacier Bay in the winter months. So it's pretty
Wow.
quiet.
So it's only in the winter months that they live there.
Well, we're here year round, and then we'll have people who come in and live in the park seasonally in the summer. So we're kind of getting geared up for that. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, Alaska is one of those places where, the weather really rules. And so it's if you need to fly out and get to Juneau, it's like weather permitting. And it's one of those places where when the pilots say we're not going to fly, everybody's like, I'm good.
Yeah, right?
No problem. Nobody gets
Yeah.
impatient. You just kind of have
Oh
to
well, tomorrow
build
maybe.
exactly. You build that into your schedule. So,
Wow, it's a
yeah.
totally different way of living, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It requires some adjustments,
Yeah.
but it does have its benefits, and the benefits are big. Yeah,
That's really cool.
it
So
is.
I also need to say that for those people that don't know, and there might be more of those that know that don't know this, is that you are a park ranger
Right.
and you have that uniform and everything that I love so much. Because
The uniform flat hat. No, I work for the National Park Service, and what I do is I head up the Interpretive and Education Division here at Glacier Bay, and I've done that in Denali National Park in interior Alaska, and also down at Mount Rainier, down in the lower 48. But what we are, the interpretive rangers, we're the people who lead the walks and talks and do the media about the parks. And, everybody, I mean, it's a wonderful reason to go to work every day is to know that you are working on behalf of these places that are really significant to America and I mean, really to the world. And our whole role as a ranger, there are lots of different people that are kind of classified as rangers, but we're all about helping visitors understand why the park exists and help them make sense of the wonders of this place. And so if we do our jobs well, they will help us protect this place and other places and sort of wake up to the things that are going on around the planet. So it's an inspiring work. It really is.
oh, I bet, yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine.
So
I mean, especially with Alaska, because Alaska is this it's still a wilderness.
totally.
It's not like New York, which like rolling hills and countryside and very nice and everything, but it's a wilderness out there, and you can, there are places in Alaska where you could travel for days without seeing anything or anyone, if you're
Yeah.
lucky.
Oh, yeah.
Not
I
bears
mean,
and wolves and whatnot.
it's totally true. And this last summer, my husband and I had an opportunity. We did a kayak trip up into one of the arms of Glacier Bay, and uh, three three boats and no other people over the course of that time.
Wow.
But I think the thing about national parks, and I'm here as a private citizen, not as a ranger, but uh, they each national park is established for a specific purpose, and
Oh, I didn't
and
know that.
even yeah, and so no two parks are alike, and so if you go to a park, I mean, you might, you're experiencing the nature and that sort of thing, but you kind of dig into the reason why it was created as a national park, and you will find that there's a really unique reason for that. Uh, and so those are some of the key stories to share, and a really important part about Glacier Bay is that it is a place that 250 years ago, there was no bay. It was just a huge glacier that just filled, this entire area. Where I'm sitting was probably under, 1,000, 2,000 feet of ice.
Oh my gosh.
And then there was a very rapid retreat of the glacier, and then life has been returning to the land. And so it's that whole dynamic and the science related to it, and the fact that this is Tlingit homeland, and so there's some really compelling reasons as to why this is a national park.
Right, and Tlingit being the native peoples of that area.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So Lisa Wilcox, I'm just looking at her messages right now. She says, "How cold is it there?" So to give you an idea, it's 21 degrees, or it was 21 degrees this morning. I got sun streaming in through the window, and the ice is melting off the roof here in New Hampshire, and the temperature here it's a balmy 23 right now, apparently. So what is it? So what is it up where you are?
You know what? It's probably close to freezing here. It's actually very, very comfortable temperatures right now. I mean, Southwest Alaska. I know I'm.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, you're from Alaska when close to freezing is comfortable.
There is something to be said for that. You do adjust, but I mean, we're maritime, so it's and it's that wet cold, but it's actually super comfy outside. It's in the interior of Alaska where you get the really extreme -30, -40.
Yeah.
But then that's a dry cold. So there's something to be said for that.
There is something to be said about a dry cold. I much prefer. I like drier weather than wetter weather, and I grew up in England, where it can be. You can be sweating because it's so sticky and humid out. But Bob Canagus, I can't pronounce his last name. He wonders if Ingrid knows his now retired park ranger interpreter friend, John Morris.
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah. And I worked with John for many years. He was in the Alaska Regional Office. I was in Denali, actually, when I was here in Glacier Bay earlier in the 2000s. And I actually see John from time to time because he has gone on to work with NASA and their Earth to Sky program about climate change. And here in Glacier Bay, we're all about sharing, the climate change message. So we're doing the Earth to Sky program. So I actually see John.
So how long have you been there up in Glacier Bay?
I was here for 4 years in the early 2000s. And then my husband and I were moving back to Alaska. It was in 2018. And that was when I had stepped away from the Park Service. I was working as a professional storyteller. I was traveling on expeditions, telling stories on expeditions, and the Park Service contacted me and kind of made me an offer we couldn't refuse. So we came back to Glacier Bay in 2018. Nice. Yeah, no. Such a gift, yeah.
Yes. I worked with someone that was, when I worked for, I won't mention the name of the company, but she was one of the best bosses that I ever had, and this company offered her, they said, name your price. And so she was like, yeah, I'm not interested. And they kept saying that. And so she said, all right, I'll name my price. She said, I named this most ridiculous price. And I thought they were going to turn around and say no. And they said yes. So she had to take this job. I mean, she didn't have to, but it would have been stupid not to. But that's so cool. So how much change have you seen since you first moved up there and to now with global change? I'm just curious.
With climate change? Well, the faces of some of the glaciers in my short time have changed very noticeably. But the Fairweather Range, that mountain range that we started out with, being a coastal range, that is fed by a lot of moisture that comes in off the Gulf of Alaska. So some of those glaciers that come down to tidewater, but it's kind of hard to tell with that. But what we generally see is glaciers thinning. They're kind of pulling down from. They're not filling the valley as robustly. And then I will add that my husband, first we have this connection with Glacier Bay. Before we knew each other in the early 80s, he came here to work a summer at the lodge as just a grunt lodge employee. And those summers in national parks can be life-changing. But when we did our kayak trip last year, as we were kayaking up what's called the east arm of Glacier Bay, he kept saying things to me like, when I was here in the 80s, the glacier face was here. And the glacier was
Oh
nowhere
wow.
in sight. It was up around the corner and, in fact, grounded. So
Wow.
there has been significant change. And part of that, for a long time, our story was all about the dynamics of a tidewater glacier is such that, when certain things occur, it makes it very difficult for the glacier to keep extending out into the water. And so there's kind of an unzipping that occurs. But now what you have on top of it is that layer of climate change, which is a double whammy.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And I'm, the way that the cycles of weather, they do change. But I think that with everything that we've stuck up in the atmosphere over the last 200 years, we've certainly accelerated that beyond any kind of like range of sensibility. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. So Rachel Hedman she says we have wet cold in Wisconsin and dry cold in Utah.
Yep.
Which is, yes. I was wondering why she was talking about Wisconsin, because she's a Utah. She lives in Utah. And Bob says, John and I worked together for Youth Conservation Corps, building trails with teens in
That's
Haines.
Haines, Alaska, which isn't far from here. Yeah.
Okay.
But, Alaska is one of those places where I think a lot of people say, I'm going to go up there for a summer. And it's a life-changing summer. And then there are some people who, once Alaska kind of gets into your blood, it's like it's never gone.
Yeah.
Never gone.
So I have an artist friend that lives in Vermont, Alison Teague, and she was in Alaska for a long time. And I think that she would really love to get back up there.
Yeah.
I really do. So Karen Page Davis says, I love Ingrid and her adventures. I love Ingrid too, and her stories. She's freaking awesome. I don't think I've ever said this to your face, but you're one of my favorite. You have become, because I didn't know much of your work, but you have become, throughout working with TBD, one of my top 5 favorite storytellers. I have to tell you that. I absolutely love your skill, your chops. So how did you get into storytelling?
Simon, I'm honored. And right back at you. But it's interesting, how life kind of goes in circles. But my mother was a member of a storytelling group in Port Angeles, Washington. And every year they had this festival, which was usually, it was in October. And I mean, they brought in the big guns, for this festival. And my mother was always like, you would not believe these storytellers, But I was always away, and I lived in Alaska and that kind of thing. And I was here at Glacier Bay in the early 2000s. And one of the programs that our rangers did, I was a supervisory ranger at the time, and one of the programs that our rangers did for kids who came on cruise ships were tell stories. And they weren't working. The rangers were like, they were kayaking, and the kids were bored, and the cruise ships were saying, this. And there was this fall where, so we get this feedback, like, these are just not good. And the rangers are like, we hate them. And the kids are bored. And you're like, so we're sitting around the table and we're like, well, the conversation is, should we scuttle stories as an approach to do these kids programs? And I'm like, stories are, kind of universal. Maybe our rangers just don't know how to tell stories. And I'm like, my mom is a member of this storytelling group, and they do this festival and they do workshops, and maybe I should just go there and see what it is. So I did. I went down to the festival. The lovely Beth Horner was there telling this amazing story about a sewage treatment plant, plant isn't quite the right word, but in Columbia, Missouri. And I'm sorry, my image keeps disappearing. And
we should probably mention that. So Ingrid, being in the middle and absolutely freaking nowhere, pretty much, has spotty internet connection. So if she freezes, it's okay. If she freezes for a long time, then I'll step in and don't worry. Yeah. It's going to be all right.
You have to keep the audience safe. But I went to that storytelling festival. Mm-hmm. It totally changed my life. we came back. I came back. We did our programming, our training for the Rangers completely differently the next year. The Rangers all came up with their own programs. They loved their programs. The kids loved their programs. The cruise ships loved the programs. It turned that program 180 degrees, and it changed my life.
Wow.
And after that, I was like, I have to pursue this. And I was still living in Alaska. And I mean, we tell stories as interpretive rangers. That's just what we do. But I hadn't thought about it as being a storyteller. And but to keep my toe in the stream of high caliber telling and how to learn how to do that, I enrolled in the ETSU, East Tennessee State University master's program.
Right. So this is a real master's program for storytelling, which takes a
Yeah.
lot of commitment.
Well, I was on a very slow boat. It took me 7 years.
Oh, okay.
And I would go in the summer months. My supervisor totally supported it. And Dr. Sobel and Delana Reed were the leads at the time. And the fact that I did it on the slow boat was phenomenal, because it was like I just had these amazing instructors.
Yeah, because there would have been turnover, and you would have, in 7 years, you would have got to experience all these different people. That must have been freaking awesome.
Well, in the summer, they bring in, guest instructors. So Elizabeth Ellis and Sherry Norfolk and Novak.
David Novak.
David Novak and Doug Lippman. And I mean, it was just amazing. Not to mention, I got to meet the many students going through the program over the 7 years. So it's just, I felt like I was part of a very big ETSU cohort. But that was really profound for me. And then also the opportunity to work with people in storytelling guilds like the Portland Storytellers Guild and the Story People of Clallam County. And actually the whole Pacific Northwest has a really strong storytelling network. So yeah, it's that, but the whole thing started with, how can we get rangers to tell better stories to kids? And here we are 20 years later. Life is very different. What a gift.
Yeah, right. So I mean, this is turning more into an interview than a chit chat, which is, I don't know, are you okay with that?
Oh yeah, sorry.
I'm milking your mic. I keep just like throwing these questions at you.
No.
So you said that you took off a period of time before you had the offer that you couldn't refuse to become a professional storyteller. So how long was that period?
Well, it was 3 years of the full time. Yeah.
Okay.
And prior to that, I would be squeezing it in around rangerhood, and then my past is checkered. It's complicated. I've always managed to keep a toe in expedition tourism. So whenever I was away from the service leading trips or something like that, what I would try to do is share stories on those expeditions. And then as time went on, I became more and more of a sort of historian, storyteller, and then folklorist and that kind of thing on expeditions. So it's all kind of interesting weaving.
Yeah. I think the most interesting people have a checkered background. I mean, I say this as somebody who's been a professional photographer, who's run youth hostels and managed youth hostels for 5 years, and someone that's worked for corporate America, and yeah, so I totally biased. But yes,
Simon,
I think
what you do though is you pulled all of that together.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is, and that's with storytelling, it's just phenomenal, because all these different life experiences that you've had, that I've had, is that those experiences come out in our stories, even if they're folk tales, because it gives us a perspective with which to tell them, which is really important, I think.
Well, and I would think, I mean, you with your experience, and you post those beautiful photographs of the woods and things, that for an eye and or a more inclusive eye, and you bring all of that in to the stories that you tell, because that's the sort of thing that you're imagining. So
I do. I see things.
As long as you don't say dead people. Yeah.
I was about to say that, and I thought, maybe not. So he just had a slew. I see dead people everywhere. We actually, so one of the corporations that I worked for, the customer service department, when that movie came out, we had this still from it with that kid saying, "I see dead people," right? Except we changed, so we changed it because it was customer service. So like, "I see idiots everywhere."
Yeah.
I know. It was a really good company to work for, and we took our customer service very, very seriously. But we also had, there were all these secret codes that we would have for certain issues. Oh, it's an RFM, and it was like, wow. When I first started, I was like, "What's an RFM?" It's read the flaming manual. So it's like, oh yes, we know what that problem is. If you open up your manual and you turn it to, it's an RFM. It's like RFM. It's on page 60 of the manual. It tells you exactly how to do it in nice, easy steps. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
That reminds me. There was a time where when I was leading trips in Alaska, and a friend and I were hired to work on the ship because the ship had been chartered by this special group. And there was the head of the company who was on board, and he was always coming up to us for information. It was like he couldn't think at all. It's like he didn't read anything. And what I remember is he came up to the desk one time, and he had lost his ID to get on and off the ship. And he's like, "How do I get my ID?" And we're like, "Well, what happened to it?" And he goes, what did he say? "I don't have it. I lost it. I threw it away." And we're like, "Okay, you don't have it, or you lost it, or you threw it away."
Yeah.
Anyway, crack this up. I guess.
Yeah, it's like my son. It's like my son when he was at high school. He was kind of funny. I was like, "Did you do your homework?" "Yes." "Maybe." "No."
It'll come out.
Yes, and it used to come out at that speed as well, which was kind of nice. So, hang on. Oh, so Lisa Wilcox says that you're in her top 4. Wow.
Oh, Lisa,
so that's good. And Via, she wants to know if you're going to share a story with us. So we did talk about it, and I think Ingrid will share a story. Antonio is here, so he's like, "Yay!" And he actually corrected me. He says that you're in the middle of everything, because I said you're in the middle of nothing, which I I knew when I said that I was going to get called on it. I just expected you to do it, not Antonio.
Yeah. Also, Misty, I do realize checkered past. I said that with my tongue in my cheek. Yes, I think checkered past means somewhat notorious.
Well, I can do, but I know what you mean.
It's complicated. Yeah.
Oh, and Misty says that your mom, Ingrid, helped. Oh, so your mom, yeah, that is awesome. I know, totally awesome. Who else have we got? Love that phrase, interpretive rangers. I know, right?
Yeah.
It is a cool phrase. It's almost like the badge wouldn't be like one of those steel badges. It would be something really cool and Dali-esque,
Go.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, I do see Katie put in there that if you are an NSN member, and you enroll in the ETSU program, you do get in-state tuition. And I've got to give a big shout out for that, because the NSN, the National Storytelling Network, made it possible for me, being somebody who lived in Alaska, to afford the ETSU. So that
I've never done the program because I looked at the cost of it and I was like, there's no way I can, it just doesn't make sense, being old like I am. No, Rachel Hebman says, "Yes, I only went during the summer. It took 7+ years to had to balance many things." Oh, you're always balancing things, Rachel. Rachel's like a nut. She's a good nut, right? So I just backpedal really quickly. Yeah. She is like, there are these people that can do like 100 million things and get them all done. I had a colleague here in town that she moved out further west not long ago. And she just blew me away with everything. And she was always like in this like kind of, I got to go and do this now. But she would, tons and tons of stuff, and she would always get it done, which always blew me away. And Misty says, "Your stories have made me want to visit Alaska. This interview gives me the hope that my husband might actually enjoy himself if I can convince him to." Go on your own, Misty. Just take the kids. Make him pay for it. Yeah. I'm a troublemaker. Oh dear. What else have we got here? Karen says, so how can we teach history? Well, storytelling, yeah. I mean, when I was... So here's the thing with me growing up in England, you know, our history was really... I mean, it's not a huge country compared to the States. So our history was all around us. So we could actually do day trips and we'd go to visit, like, you know, Billy Wobblerod and Shakespeare, you know, up in Stratford. And we can see houses that people lived in, castles, battlefields, and all that kind of stuff. And so we, as kids, we were taught a lot of history as story, which was amazing. Or at least the teachers I had. So yeah, hang on. How can we teach history? Yes. Oh, Alan's here. Sorry, I just noticed Alan popping in. Hi, Alan.
Awesome. Hi, Alan.
And Scott's here, my friend Scott. I just told you how my checkered background is. And Antonio says, Misty Mater, call them up and see what's going on now. I'm sure they can figure something out. Oh, I guess that's to do with the, I don't know what that's to do with.
But to touch on Karen and her, the thing about history.
Yes, please do.
And to think about, I mean, you know, a lot of national parks are set up because they're historical parks. But when you look at these wilderness parks, like what we have here in Alaska, a way to think about wilderness is that, you know, this is the way the world used to be. You know, when people came west in their covered wagons, they were coming west into wild lands. And so this ability to preserve these natural places is an opportunity for you to visit history. It is a chance for you to experience what ancestors experienced when they explored the landscape. And so that is a huge part of wild places.
Yeah, I had an experience when we moved to this house. We our back lawn, most of it was on a slope. I mean, you know, 45-degree plus angle slope. And so what I did was I dug the top of it off to make a kind of like a 2-level platform, so that we had a little bit more garden to sit in, and a lot of rocks, the granite state, right? And as I'm using these poles and, you know, to move these rocks out of the way, and I, you know, throughout that experience of, you know, like the week it took me to clear this space, I had a completely new appreciation, because these rocks weren't that big, you know, like I think the biggest rock was, you know, it was a fair-sized rock, but knowing that some of these people in New Hampshire and Vermont were moving boulders like 4 times that size and having to use oxen to pull them out of the ground to, you know, just gives you a completely new perspective of, like, you know, this is like new territory.
Like that cleared field took a lot of effort.
Yeah, right. And, you know, this is just like one strip of about, you know, I don't know, 20 feet by 10 feet. And it was just like back-breaking stuff. Yeah. So, because people have asked, and we're just wittering right now, would you, or I'm wittering, you're not, you're telling interesting things. Actually, I want to share something that my mum said. Where is it? Diana Goldfinch. Ingrid, you're such a lovely person and so interesting to listen to. Well, sorry, I said that in a very crappy voice. Let me read that. Ingrid, you're such a lovely person and so interesting. She is. I love Ingrid. And so that cute little angelic face. Could you zoom yourself in a little closer so that people can see that wonderful baby-like face? Because I tell you, she has a very wicked sense of humour, which I didn't realise until working with the cohort. And every once in a while, we'll be talking about something. She'll say something. I'm like, did Ingrid just say that?
I do play it.
Yes, you do. You do. Yeah. So, oh, hang on. Antonio's got something to say. Ingrid, have you been in a dire situation as a ranger, rescue, or during any of your... Oh, I bet you have. Killer whales coming after a tourist.
Yeah. Well, Antonio, first of all, what I would say is that orca would not come after people. They actually... Okay, I could go on about orca or killer whales, but their echolocation, they are so good at sending out sounds, you know, and the sounds bouncing back, that they can actually discern between different types of salmon. And they specialize in eating certain types of salmon. And there are some that specialize in eating fish and some that specialize in eating seals or marine mammals. But they are so good at that there have been instances where orca have actually, people have been swimming or standing in the water, orca have come right up to them and touched them and then backed off. They don't recognize it as food. It's not like a shark or something like that.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, but do you want me to respond to Antonio?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Um, well, this is not, as a ranger, it's always safety first. So I can't really say that I've been in a dire situation. And I mean, I have had bear encounters. I have come face to face with bears. But when I do what you're supposed to do, which is stand your ground and wave your hands and talk to the bear has done what bears do, which is, oh, I'm not interested in her. And they turn and go away. But I will say that I had, after I had been working for the Park Service and I had made that big step of leaving the service to become a professional storyteller and to work with my husband in expedition tourism. And I was trying to, and you go through a lot of like, stepping off the cliff. Is this going to be safe? How is this? And I quit my job and went down to the Antarctic, like immediately went on this Antarctic expedition. And there was this day where we were in this bay and it was completely foggy. So you're just looking at this slate gray water and this fog. And all of a sudden we become aware, you can hear this, and you can see, and there are humpback whales around us. So we put the Zodiacs down in the water and I'm out there with my passengers. And
what's a Zodiac?
Oh, Zodiacs are the black inflatable boats that hold about 12 people. Okay. They've got an outboard engine. So I'm there, driving the Zodiac and people are sitting on the tubes and we're all looking around like, where are the whales going to come up? And the whales are doing what's called bubble net feeding. So these are humpback whales. They're down in the water column. They go around in a circle and they release bubbles that form this net that concentrate the krill. And then whales come up in the middle of that with their mouth open and feed. So anyway, we're watching and I'm standing in the boat and I all of a sudden see the green water of the bubbles start to form and my boat is inside the circle.
Oh my gosh.
And so I say to everybody, I'm like, hold on. And we move the boat just outside the bubble net. And then these whale heads come up and then they sink beneath the water. And at that moment, I'm like, I have made the right choice in my life.
Oh, my word. So, I mean, yes, that must have been like, one of those moments. Mm-hmm. Oh, and magic. Yeah, right. Because, how close were you to this head when it came out? You must have been like feet away.
It was probably 15 yards maybe. But yeah, these just big whale heads.
So how big are the rings of bubbles then?
Probably, let me think, maybe, maybe, no, not even 30 yards, maybe 20 yards across.
So they're big.
Pretty tight, but it's a pretty tight bubble. And then often like 2 or 3 whales will come up together. So there has to be room for that. And
see, I always thought it was just one whale that would come up and do that.
Yeah, no, you'll see one, you'll see 3. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's pretty, and you smell the krill in the air. Whale breath is like, wow. Yeah, feel the kind of mist come over your face. It's really pretty cool.
Oh, I bet. Oh my gosh, my brother would love that. He's big into whales. He needs to come up to Alaska and hang out with you guys, I think. Mm-hmm. He really does. So Papa Joe says, "Were you?" Oh, hang on. Wait. Oh, the comments keep moving. Were you never thinking that you were one more mistake from death? That's kind of a grim question, Papa Joe, from you. It's kind of a question that I might ask.
Well, I was probably, a few feet away from an uncomfortable situation, but it's interesting, I mean, whales, it's like it seems like they have a sense of who is nearby and what is happening, as long as you're making noise, because they're very auditory.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I don't know. I can't. I don't have any encounters like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's incredible.
the natural world speaks to us in ways that are big and ways that are
Yeah.
small. And so, the profound, I mean, I love it when I'm out for a walk and there's just a little squirrel that suddenly takes
Yeah.
notice of me, and then you have this little magical moment, where
Yeah.
seeing a
I
shoe.
actually saw when I was out in the woods like here. So I have had like what I would call woodland encounters. When I used to tell stories at Mount Washington at the resort up Mount Washington. When I first started doing that years ago, before it became an Omni resort, we used to do these campfire stories outside, and we had marshmallows and s'mores and all that kind of stuff. And we'd have a group of kids, and I'd be there telling stories, and I'd always stand so that they're looking at the hotel because it was nighttime, it was dark, and the hotel's lit, and it's a freaking awesome hotel, right? And I'm standing there telling this story, and I look up, and there's a fox on the edge of the light from the fire, and I was like, this is so cool. I said, all right, so I paused the story, and I told people this, don't all turn around at once, which of course everyone does, but let's be quiet. But there's a fox listening to the stories too, and I'll tell a story for a fox when I finish this one. And then another time we had a mama bear and two bears walking across the background. So I was like talking to the people from the hotel. I was like, they're kind of, they're pretty close to us. They're probably 20 yards away, maybe a bit less. I was like, is this I don't think this is safe, basically. And all of a sudden this like, and then a 4x4 comes like flashing its lights and beeping its horn and scares them off. But for that moment, when they were there sitting, not sitting, but they were standing listening to the stories, it was, those are moments that are just amazing. And I've seen, we see black bear all the time. Well, not all the time, but we see black bear frequently here in New London, in town. We've had them walking through our yard and down into the woods over there.
Totally. I mean, we need to share our world
Yeah.
with wild creatures. And I totally agree. Renee has this comment. These magical moments are big moments and they are small moments. And they are, I mean, I was walking to work the other day and there was a spider that was crawling across the snow. And I'm like, how are you doing that?
Yeah.
And,
Right.
I mean, it's below freezing and this little spider is still active. And it was just,
Wow.
yeah, wondrous. Or sometimes I walk a trail that goes to work and it's pretty wide, but there will be spider webs all across the trail. And so they've been busy building over the course of the night. And it's like, how do they do that?
I
So,
know.
yeah, it's just
And then,
being
and then
intentional.
after you've walked down the path, they're like, bloody hell, didn't she see what we've been doing all night? She just walked straight through, no respect. I can't believe it. Now we've got to start doing it all over again.
Actually, I do tend to duck under when I see them, and I'm not the only person that walks the trail. Otherwise, to be honest, I probably would walk around.
All right. Megan,
Yeah.
Meg's here too. So Meg's made a couple of comments, but I haven't caught them. But she made one just now. Where has it gone? Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
All right. Anyway, so Megan is here. But hi, Megan. It's good to see you. Meg Gilman.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she's excellent. She's a really good storyteller too. I wish she'd get back in the game. There we go. She's on. What's this? In her 80s, my mum went to Alaska to visit a high school friend who had a farm there. Mum got bored, so picked strawberries with the migrant workers.
Oh.
And when she came back, her suitcase weighed a ton. It was full of rocks. She brought rocks to the Granite State. They have the nicest rocks in Alaska. I love that. Why would
We have
you
a nice
bring
rock.
I know. Well, we went to the Painted Desert, and I've been to a couple of places actually where they say you're not allowed to bring things back with you unless you buy them, certified in stores and stuff like that, which is perfectly normal. But yeah, we've actually also brought rocks back to the Granite State here in New Hampshire, and yeah. So do you want? So we got sidetracked again because it's my show, and that's what happens with my show.
It's lovely to chat with you, Simon.
It's lovely chatting with you. So we did have a request for a story. Is from I think it was Lisa. Lisa wanted to hear a story from you. And you did say that earlier that you might have a story that's a personal story interwoven with a folktale, which
Yeah.
it's two for the price of one. I love that.
All right.
Would you
Well,
care to tell a story, or would you not? It's up to you.
no, you know, um, so the story that I would like to share
Uh-huh.
comes from an expedition that I did 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, when I went to the North Pole. So I'll go ahead and launch. Is that cool?
Yes, I'm going to make you full screen because
All
people
right.
don't need to see me.
No. Um, so I am standing on the bow of an icebreaker as we are making our way north toward the North Pole. And as I look out all around me, it is ice, this jumble of sea ice. And we've been pushing through this ice for a couple of days. And I love to stand at the bow of this ship and just look down at the way the bow hits the ice. And when it hits the ice fractures and then splits apart, and the ship pushes through. And then as the ship goes through, the ice seals up behind the vessel. And as we're looking out across this jumble of ice, it's a gray sky. And suddenly somebody calls, "Bear." And we all look in the direction, and way off in the distance, we see this creamy dot. It's a polar bear. So we radio the bridge, they stop the ship, and we watch this polar bear moving across the ice. And then we see two more creamy dots behind this bear. So it's a polar bear mother and her cubs. And the fact that we're stationary now, we can see that the way they're moving, they are going to come right across the bow. So we're all standing there and watching. And the personalities of these two cubs come out. There is one cub that is right behind mom. So as mom travels, the cub is just like, right, keeping up. And then there's this other cub that is like lollygagging behind. And it comes to this pool of meltwater on top of the ice. And it's just, psh, 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 splashing in the meltwater. And then it suddenly, mom and the other cub keep walking. And suddenly it realizes it's way behind. So it runs and catches up with mom. Well, as I am watching them, I think of this Inuit story about there once was an old woman. And this old woman lived in the village by herself. Her husband had died. She had never had children. And the people of the village, they took care of the old woman. Whenever the hunters came back, they always made sure that she got some meat. So she was taken care of, but she was lonely. She longed for a child, and she would go and she would walk out along the beach and yearn for a child. Well, one day she was there at the beach, and floating just off the beach, there was a chunk of ice. And on that chunk of ice was a little polar bear cub. And she looked at the cub and she said, "Oh, where is your mother?" "The hunters must have killed it. I will take you. I will adopt you. I will raise you as my son." And so she did. She took this little polar bear cub home. And from then on, whenever the hunters brought her a chunk of meat, she always divided it and gave some of it to that little polar bear cub. And the cub grew. And soon, when the other kids of the village were out playing, the little polar bear cub would go out and play with them. They just accepted the cub as one of their own. And the cub grew bigger and the cub grew stronger. And soon it was time for all the young boys of the village to learn to hunt. Well, when the polar bear cub learned to hunt, I mean, from the beginning, he was good. He was a natural. And so soon, the polar bear cub was bringing in the biggest seals, much bigger than any of the hunters. So the hunters started to watch this, and they didn't feel too good about it. So one night, they all gathered together in a hut. And there was one of the hunters who said, "That bear makes us look bad." And there was another hunter who said, "If we killed him, he would feed the village for a week." And then there was another hunter who said, "He must die." Well, there was a child who was a friend of the polar bear cub, and he heard the hunters talking this way. So he ran to the old woman and told her what they were saying. And the old woman turned to her son, the polar bear cub, and said, "You must run away. You must run across the ice, run far, far away, but please do not run so far away that I cannot find you. But I need to know that you are safe, so go." So they hugged, and that polar bear cub ran off way, way far across the ice. When the hunters came to find the polar bear cub, they could not. And they went out and they searched across the ice, and they could not find that cub. So they came back to the village, and life went on. And the old woman, she was so lonely. She so missed her son. And time passed. And there was one day where her heart ached so much. She just went walking out across the ice. She walked far, far away from the village across the ice, and she started calling out to her son. And she called, and there was nothing. And she thought, he is gone. But then in the distance, she saw a creamy dot. And that creamy dot was coming towards her. And the closer it got, the more she realized it was her son. And he had grown, and he was this big, robust bear, and he was healthy, and he was strong, and his fur glistened. And he ran up to the old woman, and he hugged his mother. And as he hugged her, he could feel her bones. She was so thin. So he immediately ran, and he killed a seal and dragged it back. And the old woman pulled out her knife, and she lovingly cut up that seal. And she gave the biggest, fattest parts to her son, the polar bear. And then she ate. And then she said to her son, "I must go home, but I will come back tomorrow." And she picked up the rest of the seal and brought it back to the village. And the next day she went out to the ice and met with her son, as she did the next day and the next. And soon the people of the village realized what she was doing. But the hunters, they did not interfere. They would not interfere between the old woman and the polar bear. They would not interfere between the love of a mother for her child. Well, as I watched this mother polar bear and her two cubs, in my heart, I thought, I want you to run far, far away on the ice. I need to know that you are safe, but please don't run so far away that we cannot find you. And at this point, the two little polar bear cubs, they had found this chunk of ice. And they were playing with that chunk of ice. And the mother polar bear, she had just kept walking across the ice. So the distance between them had grown and grown. And she suddenly turned around and realized that her cubs were gone. And she came walking back towards her cubs. And then, I don't know what she said to them, but the two cubs just dropped that chunk of ice and ran after Mom. And we all watched as that polar bear mother and her two cubs disappeared across the ice into the mist.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. That was so good.
Thank you, Simon.
Oh, on so many levels. Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. See why I like her? See why she's good? She's not even a full-time storyteller. She's a full-time interpretive ranger doing interpretive rangering things.
We are the storytellers on behalf of the national parks. But
that's such a good story.
Very special moment. Yeah.
So one thing that I didn't realize, because I've never seen a polar bear in the wild, but I did see one when we went up to Montreal, and they have that huge biosphere dome thing, and we saw some polar bears in there. They are big animals.
Yeah.
They are huge.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Big.
because like black bears, you know, they're what, like 4 feet off the ground, maybe, right?
They're about like 180 pounds, so they're
Right.
not big. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got the brown bears, which are probably, you know, another foot higher when they're
Mm,
on all fours.
right.
And then grizzlies, they get big.
Well, that's
But polar,
actually, yeah, actually, a grizzly bear and a brown bear are the same species of bear. It's just that one is an interior animal and eats more vegetation.
uh-huh.
Excuse me if I put on my ranger hat.
No, you can absolutely correct me all you want. I love it.
A coastal bear, and they get a lot of salmon in their diet, so they get so much more protein, so they grow bigger.
Oh,
Like, brown bears. I mean, you will get the occasional grizzly who's got onto a really good food source. That'll get up about 800 pounds. But coastal bears will be, 1,000, even heavier. But yeah, I did.
is that
I
why
did
grizzly bears are more grumpy because they don't have a good food source?
because they're cranky.
'Cause they're
Yeah,
cranky.
but I did. I mean, I thought I had seen some big brown bears, but I happened to go to Katmai National Park where they just feed on red salmon, and I turned around and I saw a bear that was. I mean, that bear had curves in places where other bears don't have places. I mean, it was the size of a car. I mean, it was huge. And then polar bears are, they're big, sleek animals. They got a really long neck and just this amazing. All bears have a good sense of smell, but at polar bear, you think, there's just not a whole lot going on out there in the ice, and they have to have a super, super good sense of smell
Right.
in order to find their way to food.
Oh,
So, yeah, pretty impressive.
yeah, we like polar bears in our house.
Yeah.
My son especially, he has this. I don't know what's going on, but he has a very he has this connection with polar bears. I think
Mm.
that goes beyond, just liking them. Ah, yeah, they're beautiful animals, and when they're in the water, I mean, because there's this big sheet of glass that we were watching through. They're just
Mhm.
incredibly graceful. They're such beautiful. I mean, even on land, they're not. Yeah,
These
and then
amazing.
when they dive down,
Yeah,
yeah, oh, incredible creatures, absolutely incredible
beautifully
creatures.
adapted for what they do. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I realize, I'm talking about this charismatic megafauna, but I also have to just throw out, I mean, I really just am a huge fan of the wild and all that brings. And, I just find wonder in the little porcupines and the little shrews and, the things that come across our ways. I mean, that is life. And I just
yeah,
love, that we share this world together. It's a much, much
yeah.
richer place. Yeah.
I like in the springtime when there's rain, we get those little efts, these little teeny tiny red salamander things with little dots on their
Oh,
backs.
very cool.
It's, yeah, they are,
Yeah.
and the thing is like in the woods near us, it's an evergreen forest, so you get a lot of needles that turn that russet color, and
Mhm.
so if you're not paying attention, they blend in very well.
Mm.
And if I see them in the middle of the path, because in normal times, not outside of COVID, I'm usually up pretty early and out walking the dog, and I'll get a
Mhm.
little stick and move them to the side of the path, and like if I can find some sun for them, I'll find a little bit of sun patch for them to warm themselves up, but not before I take the photograph, of course.
Well, that's an important way to connect and pay
Yeah,
attention.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, there's all sorts of beauty out there. There really is.
Yeah.
There really is.
That is,
So
oh, go
you've
ahead.
got 3 CDs.
I do.
You do.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
one did you make first?
Grimm's with a twist.
Uh-huh.
So those are,
Is it a
classic.
lemon twist or
It's an evil twist in some ways, but yeah,
what? You
so
take a grim story and give it an evil. That's
and even more so.
that's like saying, yes, I took the Marquis de Sade and added a whip or two. It's like what?
Yeah. Oh no. So no, the Grimm's was first, and
Uh-huh.
and then it was Operation Bouncy Chair, almost true stories, and so some personal stories on that one, and Tall Tales, and then most recently Lost Hearts and Other Creepy Stories. I felt like I kind of wanted something out there that was, ghostly and good for Halloween or dark and stormy nights. So, yeah.
Well,
No.
you did a great Halloween story with the TBD storytelling group.
Oh,
That was phenomenal. I also like
thanks.
the picture, which I nearly used for our poster, which is Ingrid with this like huge, great carving. Well, it's not a carving. What kind of knife is it?
Yeah, butcher knife. Yeah.
It was a butcher's knife. It was like
Yeah.
huge.
It
It's
was,
just
it
like
was funny.
sweet
My,
little lady.
I gotta tell
Oh,
ya.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Because I look at that angelic face of yours, and I know what you're like when you're with us lot in TBD. But I want to know what you were like as a child. Were you the child that was like right behind mother, following very strictly and sternly, and like that's what I'm going to do, or were you the one that like hung behind and played in the ice?
Well, I have two sister, and we were outdoor kids. Um, So, I think I was a little bit of both, kind of like a storyteller. It's like I sample from all different genres, and I think as a kid, I was kind of the same. I mean, I was a Girl Scout, but I also wanted to be Daniel Boone. So
That makes sense. I can
yeah,
see that.
yeah, yeah. So
Do you have one of those knives that you take with you everywhere when you're out in the wilds? Just
I
in
used
case you need to slice up some seal meat to give to the
yeah.
bears.
Um, I used to, and then when TSA started taking them away, I kind of fell out of the practice of having my little pocket knife with me. So yeah, not so much.
Yeah, the TSA.
Yeah.
Grumble, grumble. Yeah. So what are you doing to the pandemic? I assume hasn't hit you hard at all up there in Alaska.
Oh, in terms of the illness, um, it's certainly had its impacts, and we live in a really isolated place, and so we've had a few cases that have been close to us, but it has devastated Alaska tourism. So um, it's been pretty quiet. The last year in the national park, it was very, very quiet, and this year it looks like it's going to be pretty quiet as well. But I think people are itching to travel, and so they will be coming back.
They will in
Yeah,
droves.
in a major
How?
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they limit the number of ships and stuff that come into Alaska in that area.
Well, they limit the number of ships that can come into Glacier Bay, and then other places have other limitations just due to infrastructure and that kind of thing. But Southeast Alaska is pretty much a place that people, it's easiest to get around by vessel, whether it's a small ship or a big ship. And then the interior, you can actually, you can drive to Alaska, and people fly up and rent vehicles and things like that. Um, but it is, Alaska is a big place, and as
It's
is
huge.
often shared, if you took Alaska and put it over the United States, it would stretch from coast to coast. So it's kind of like when people come to visit the United States and they're like, well, I'm going to go to New York and see the United States. And you're like, well, there's a
Right.
little bit more to it, but that's a good start.
Yes. It is. It is. It's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the difference between even New York City, and New York State, from like compare
Oh,
the
yeah. Yeah.
Buffalo to New York City, or Troy,
Mhm.
and then compare that to like New Hampshire, which is you could fit a couple of New Hampshires into New York almost.
Right.
It's very different mindset and state of mind and all that kind of stuff. All right, we'll have a look at some of the comments.
Yeah.
Sorry if I uploaded a picture too many times. I'm not sure what you're talking about, mate. All right, that was Antonio. Rachel Hedman, how freaking cool is that? Yes, talking about the Bears. I don't know. The Daniel Boone. Oh, I have Daniel Boone in my blood too. Oh, like really? Oh.
Wow.
Well, there you go. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
Erin,
man.
Erin J. She must know New England pretty well. You can't get there from here. It's true. You can't. There's a lot of north-south roads, but there's not much that go. I mean, it goes like this.
Mhm.
But anyway, Ingrid, it's been. Is there anything you want to share with us other than maybe our next gig is March 30th for TBD, but you've got a bunch of stuff coming up though, haven't
Yeah.
you?
Well, the Texas Storytelling Festival is coming up,
Right.
And there's an early bird registration that expires, I think, at the end of February. But I will be doing a workshop for them on March 11th, and that's about taking stories and making your own. I'm also telling a lie with them. And then the weekend that follows, it's the Women's Storytelling Festival, which is sponsored by National Storytelling Network and Better Said Than Done. So I will be telling over the course of that weekend as well, along with a wonderful group
Yeah.
of women, some of whom may be on this call. So that is great. And then, of course, TBD, which is coming up. What is the day for that? That is
30th.
March
It's the
30th.
last Tuesday. Yeah, we do it. We've got into this habit of doing it the last Tuesday of every month.
Right.
So yeah, it's the 30th.
You will be part of that show, and I will be tech support. But
You will.
The TBD Storytellers is an amazing group of people. I am honored to be in your midst.
It's a really good group of folks, isn't it? And we're all very different in the stories that we tell. I mean, Norm does folk and fairy tales, right? And Antonio does folk and fairy tales. And I do folk and fairy tales. You do folk and fairy tales. But we all do them very differently.
Right.
I mean, and then it's you and Antonio and Norm. You do a lot of personal stories as well, which I...
And then we've got Paul Strickland, who always takes us on a wonderful journey.
Oh my gosh, Paul is such a good storyteller.
Yeah,
and then Jeff with his crazy stuff. Yeah. And then Sheila that, what doesn't Sheila do?
Yes, exactly.
Sleep, I think, is what she doesn't do.
No, it's really fantastic. And yeah, Jeff Doyle, brainchild, and then, so awesome stuff.
And you were all right. No, we're not gonna. I was gonna close up the show, but I don't think I will right now. I'm gonna ask you one more question. Maybe a few more. I don't know. So Jeff invited me to be part of the TBD group, right? When it was first, but you are also. It was you and Jeff that came up with the idea, right?
Well,
that's
Jeff
the story that he tells me.
Well, Jeff is a generous person. Jeff and I worked together on Eve and Adam, The Lost Diaries of Eve and Adam. So a two-person show based on the writings of Mark Twain. And we had such a great time working on that. And then Jeff and I sort of kicked around the idea, wouldn't it be great if we had a storytelling cohort that we could work on with stories? And Jeff had some conversations with some very well-established tellers about that. And so, we kind of bounced it back and forth, but I want to give the energy to Jeff in terms of, kind of moving that forward. I mean, I think he ran ideas by me, but I'm like, Jeff, that's a great idea. So Mr. Doyle, he is an awesome friend and a great teller.
Yeah, he is. And every time I meet him, I get to know a little bit more. We've got pretty deep in our conversations. He's a good guy. I like him a lot. Right. Well, I do have to wrap up because I have a gig in a little while and I need to prep for that. It's not an in-person gig, it's online. So I have the heater on in the garage because it's 30 degrees in there or something like that. I got my thermal trousers on.
So. Oh, well done. Well done.
I know. You got to go to your own garage to perform and you got thermals on underneath. Yeah. It's a new world we live in today. Indeed. Ingrid, so everybody, that's Ingrid's website. The events that you're doing, they're all on your website, I take it?
They are. Yeah.
Okay, good. So make a note of that. I can actually pop it in the chat. Because I can type with my fingers because it's a very easy one to do. IngridNixon.com. There it goes. So if you want to visit Ingrid's website, do so. Find out all the wonderful things she does. She hasn't updated where she sells her CDs yet. She needs to do that because CD Baby are only selling digital stuff right now. They're not selling physical product. Did you know that?
I did, and I actually will mail stuff out. So
if you want one, if you want one of Ingrid's CDs, then send her an email, and she will tell you all the different methods that you can pay, and then she'll ship it to you. So that sounds like a good plan, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining Ingrid and I on this wonderful. It's
everybody.
Nice and bright, and Ingrid's got a full day in front of her because it's 9:08 where you are, right?
Oh, we went a little long. Yeah,
we did. Yeah,
the day is just unfolding.
Yeah. You got to put that uniform on and that nice flat-brimmed hat.
I do, and I have to walk in the shadow of those glorious mountains off to the
You
office.
lucky duck.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for being here. Ingrid, you're
Thanks,
absolutely
everybody.
brilliant. It was wonderful having
Thank you,
you here
Simon.
with us. Take care, everyone. Until next Friday.